Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome everyone to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking what is honestly one of the most complex and fascinating corporate evolutions in modern European history. We're talking about the complete metamorphosis of Spain's steel industry. We're going to trace exactly how a massive state-owned project transformed into a privatized powerhouse and then eventually, well, got swallowed whole by a global conglomerate. The sheer scale of this transformation is just absolutely wild. To make sense of it all, here's our structured roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start by digging into the roots of Spanish steel, dive into the massive 1997 restructuring, check out the privatization and partnerships, crunch some real numbers in the 1997 financial picture, and finally, witness the birth of a true global giant.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the roots of Spanish steel. Let's move to the 1950s and see how this all builds up. Back in 1950, a state-owned company called ENSIDESA was formed in Avilés. Now, this wasn't just your average factory. It was literally the core driver of the Spanish economic miracle in the 1960s. The company grew at a breakneck pace, with its workforce peaking in the 1970s at an absolutely astounding 27,000 employees. But as the global economy started shifting, the state realized it had to consolidate. So, in 1991, they merged it with another historic firm. And by 1994, they essentially just carved out all the surviving, profitable parts to form a brand new state entity called CSIE.
Before we get too deep into the boardroom deals, I really want to ground you in the sheer physical reality of this business. When ENSIDESA was first built, the campus was 11 kilometers long and half a kilometer wide. Just take a second to imagine that. It was a sprawling, literal fire-breathing city of metal that initially needed 14,000 people just to get it running. This wasn't just a company. It was the physical engine powering Spain's industrial modernization.
All right, moving into Section 2, the 1997 restructuring. Now, what's really interesting about this is that we're looking at an authentic, primary source document from that exact moment in time. This is the cover of the 1997 annual report for the newly formed Aceralia. And the pages inside this very report, they serve as the literal blueprint for an incredibly aggressive privatization and corporate restructuring that changed everything. The sequence of corporate maneuvers that went down in 1997 was intense, and it happened fast. We're talking 3 rapid-fire steps. First, the state reorganized that profitable spinoff we talked about earlier, CSI. Second, they rebranded and structured it into a brand new entity, Aceralia Corporación Siderúrgica. And third, pretty much as soon as the ink was dry, they hit the button on immediate privatization. They were taking these state-owned remnants and just aggressively turning them into a massive private powerhouse. Which brings us right into Section 3, privatization and strategic partnerships. Just look at this rapid-fire expansion strategy. In 1997 alone, they formed a sweeping strategic alliance with the Luxembourg-based steel group Arbed. They snapped up the Airstrain group to control steel sections, and they acquired Usine for rebar and wire rod. Bam, bam, bam. With these sweeping acquisitions and alliances happening practically overnight, Aceralia instantly cemented itself as the undisputed, absolute largest steel company in all of Spain.
And this scanned page right out of that 1997 annual report details the Acuerdo Marco, the framework agreement. This is the exact documentation of the strategic alliance that brought the Luxembourg group Arbed in as a 35% technological partner. See, they weren't just looking for cash from investors. They were actively integrating top-tier international tech and strategy. And honestly, they weren't exactly hiding their ambitions. I've translated this crucial quote right out of the report for you. It says, "The choice of Arbed as a technological partner constitutes a strategic alliance that configures the new group as the leading steel producer in Europe." They weren't just trying to win in Spain anymore. No way. They were explicitly gunning for the #1 spot on the entire continent. Let's come to Section 4, the 1997 financial picture. 269,546,000,000 pesetas. I mean, wow. That staggering figure was Aceralia's total revenue for the year 1997 alone. Keep in mind, this is the pre-Euro era, but this massive number immediately demonstrated the sheer financial power and the massive output of this newly reorganized entity. And this brilliantly illustrates the foundation of all that power. We've got the raw 1997 balance sheets right here, assets on the left, liabilities on the right.
If you look closely down at the total asset line on the bottom left, it documents a company holding over 465 billion pesetas in total assets. It's just a breathtaking amount of industrial capital, all concentrated into a single, newly privatized corporation.
Let's break those numbers down a little further, because it's wild. Look at the jump in this extracted data table from 1996 to that pivotal 1997 restructuring. Net income leaped from about 10 billion pesetas to over 14 billion. And the total assets, they absolutely skyrocketed from 293 billion to that 465 billion mark we just talked about. This restructuring wasn't just some fancy corporate name change. It was an incredible injection of value and scale. But here's a crucial point of contrast we really have to look at. While the financials were completely soaring, the human footprint of the company was shrinking. By 1997, Aceralia employed 12,460 workers. Remember earlier when we talked about that 1970s peak of 27,000 workers under the old state-owned model? Right. So the new private era brought unprecedented financial efficiency, for sure, but it also meant the local workforce had literally been cut in half. Finally, Section 5, the birth of a global giant. We've seen how Aceralia became the undisputed champion of Spanish steel. But you know how the modern global economy works. It rarely lets national champions stay independent for long. Let's trace these final, rapid steps of consolidation. So, 1997, Aceralia is created and privatized. Just 4 years later, in 2001, it merges entirely with its tech partner Arbed and the French company Usinor to form the megacorporation Arcelor. And then, only 5 years after that, in 2006, that whole entity is absorbed to become part of the massive global ArcelorMittal empire. So, the crucial point is really understanding this dramatic shift from a local legacy to a global reality. What started decades ago as ENSIDESA, a state-owned project explicitly designed to build up the Spanish nation, eventually became Aceralia, the national champion. But today, well, today, as part of ArcelorMittal, it operates on a planetary scale. Those local plants in Spain are now just nodes in a vast, incredibly complex global network. And honestly, we can see the harsh realities of globalization and hyper-efficiency most clearly when we look at the Asturian steel workforce over time. We start at that proud peak of 27,000 workers back in the 70s. Then, we drop down to 12,460 during that highly profitable 1997 privatization phase. And by October 2020, under the umbrella of a global conglomerate, that local workforce had dropped to below 5,000 people. Which brings us to our final and, frankly, pretty provocative thought. On September 30, 2022, corporate management officially shut down one of Spain's last 2 remaining steel furnaces in Variña. It leaves us with a critical question to reflect on. What is the ultimate fate of local heavy industries and the very communities that built them once they're fully absorbed by global conglomerates? The 1997 restructuring of Spanish steel absolutely created an undeniable financial powerhouse, but the long-term human and local industrial legacy? Well, that's a much more complex story. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.